everyone, welcome back to another video. So today, yet again, we have a significant severe weather threat ongoing across the United States, specifically the southern United States this time around. From the southern Great Plains all the way into the East Coast, we will experience some severe weather occur. And this might be a pretty extreme event. We are seeing a lot of models say that this might be a significant event, maybe the most significant of 2024 so far, which is inevitable, of course, as we enter more and more into severe weather season. But really, we just have to watch the system, and we'll see what is going to happen with it. But we have an idea of what is going to happen with it with these models, so let's look into them. So first up here, we have the simulated radar. We're not going to talk about the dynamics behind this until later, but first, here we are at around what is now 3 p.m., 2 p.m., around that period of time today. As you can see, these storms down here in Texas are blowing up, and there's quite a few of them. They are very widespread, and they're almost supercellular at that. They have some bang to them, as you can see. They do weaken a little bit, as it seems, as we go into 4 p.m., maybe into 5 p.m. However, then they get started right back up here near San Angelo as the storms begin to produce some supercells. And also, it's not just Texas. You see, there is a little bit of a risk up here in Kansas. You can see a few storms firing here in Kansas, and also Oklahoma. Western Oklahoma is experiencing some storms as well. Of course, it's not just Texas. In fact, we will look at this SPC outlook, but there is just as much risk in southeastern Kansas as it is Texas, apparently. Now, I'm not sure if I can entirely find that to be true, as if we look at the surface-based Cape, there really isn't that much more Cape here than there is in Texas. In fact, more of it is capped, which means there isn't a perfect gradient between cold and warm air. I've told this in the past few videos. But we are experiencing still quite a bit of substantial convection and Cape in this area. You can see we are getting up to 2,500 I believe they are 2,500 joules, and that is a significant amount, and it might cause some storms to erupt across this area in southeastern Kansas. We'll really have to see, but we'll definitely watch those as they move on, the storms that fire in this high Cape area. But we also have quite a bit of Cape here in central Texas, south central Texas. We have also up to 2,000 to 2,500 joules per kilogram, even though on this model run, it actually shows that there's a little bit more moisture in the Kansas area. Now, if we look at the NAM, this is the opposite. This is more moisture in the Texas region, actually a little bit north of where the SBC issued the risk, which is interesting. But up there in Kansas, there's not really much. It's either really capped or none at all. It's much more southern mode here in this model of the NAM. But going back to the HRRR, you can definitely see any sign of Cape in southeastern Kansas completely dissipates by around 7, 8, or 9 p.m. by tonight. And really, a lot of it is capped here in Texas too, so that might cause severe storms to not be as substantial and not be able to grow as much as they used to. However, moving on, you can see as we move into the threat tomorrow, then a significant area of Cape begins to develop here in eastern Texas into Louisiana, and you'll see that this might be the main problem that we'll have to face over the next few days. This becomes very, very much so a very good area of moisture for storms to develop. And this is disappointing because we were hoping that these storms wouldn't fire, but it seems like it's likely, depending on how much there's truth to this, because it does seem like there's going to be quite a bit of Cape, up to 2,500 joules per kilogram, and that is definitely quite enough for storms to develop up here in eastern Texas into southwestern Louisiana. And this Cape continues into Louisiana, into Mississippi. It doesn't last for too long. Of course, as we enter night, the sun isn't fueling Cape anymore. The sun helps fuel energy for storms. So this causes the Cape to dissipate once again, but then rile right back up as we enter into Saturday, which will have to move to another area because of that. So looking at the NAM now for the rest of the day on Friday into Saturday, since because the HRRR doesn't go out that far, you can see that the storms continue and are fairly strong down here in central Louisiana into Mississippi, and they are almost discrete. Of course, this doesn't show as high resolution of a model as the HRRR, but you definitely can see that storms are getting their act together here in Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi, which is where the tornado threat is going to be. And this also moves into Alabama, where an additional risk could develop, and into Georgia. Now, of course, we were looking at the Cape, and you can see the Cape is substantial for these storms that move through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. As this storm continues to move through Saturday, there is a significant area over here near Phoenix City, Alabama, and Columbia, Georgia, of about 2,500 joules per kilogram, which is where another hotspot for tornado potential is. So we might get a lot of tornadoes possible here. We're not really saying that there's going to be a tornado outbreak here. We're still unsure, obviously, but it is a possibility as the amount of moisture here is exceeding levels that we were previously expecting. So as this moves into the Carolinas, it completely weakens, and we do have a little bit of Cape far down here in the Gulf of Mexico, but that's not going to be a worry to civilization. And all of this is out here by the time we reach at around 5 a.m., 5 p.m. on March 10th. So this definitely will be an interesting setup, and we'll have to see what exactly happens with it, but it does seem like the moisture is there for storms to develop. Looking at the storms themselves again, of course we're looking at the HRRR now because we're back into range. Let's get the simulated reflectivity back in. You can see these really are discrete storms, and that is definitely good for tornado potential. It's also good for hail, and we're going to get a lot of hail over here in Texas as well. You can see these storms definitely do have the potential to produce some hail back here in Texas. And looking back in the southeast, so yeah, these storms in Texas are looking pretty concerning. We are seeing significant amount of storms in Texas today into tomorrow. And of course, we have the Cape too. We have the convective amount. We have the background components that will allow these storms to develop. So we sure do have a lot for these storms. So what exactly are the risks for these? Well, looking at a convective outlooks, we do have a categorical slight risk currently here in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri. This is from the SPC, and you can see we have a 15% hatched risk for wind. Basically, a hatched risk means that the winds are going to be very strong. So these winds are going to be damaging. They are going to be pretty concerning, in especially southeastern Kansas and Texas into Oklahoma. Also, we do have that tornado threat, 5% in two separate areas, one in southeastern Kansas and one in Texas. These include the towns of Claiborne, Weatherford, Benbrook, Brownwood, and also down here we also have the town, I believe it was Wellington in Kansas. And in the middle of all this, we also have the 2% risk, which is for Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, Wichita, and Irving, Texas. So these are going to be some storms that may produce some tornadoes. And of course, the main threat is hail. And, okay, my mistake, this is the hail threat. This is the wind threat. The wind threat is not hatched, so there is no hatch for the wind, so we're not going to have very strong winds. But we are going to have very powerful hail. We're going to have very large hail, up to possibly 2.5 inches. That's what they said officially. 2.5 inches of diameter of hail, which is very large. That's very comparable to maybe a golf ball, maybe even more, which if you have one in your backyard or something, you can compare it and you'll really realize that that is large and it could be damaging. Of course, it's not just today. In fact, it's especially not today. We actually have especially tomorrow as the main risk, which is definitely going to be an intense risk, a slight risk, a huge slight risk for that matter, all across Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and a little bit of Florida, and a marginal risk surrounding that. This is actually, a lot of it is driven by tornadoes. Not the entirety of it, but most of it is driven by a 5% tornado risk, which is about as high as it is today, but I wouldn't be surprised if we got a 10% hatched risk, which means strong tornadoes could be possible. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it is possible. And we do have a few storms that possibly may develop here in Louisiana, Arkansas, Texas, Mississippi, and Alabama in this 5% risk that may produce tornadoes. You saw those supercells. They are in that conducive environment for some tornadoes. We also do have a wind and hail risk. Hail is expected to be pretty strong, especially back in this area in Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. We are expecting some pretty large hail to fall down from the sky, which may cause some damage, so be aware of that. We also do have that wind threat. It's not going to be especially strong. It's not going to be extremely strong winds, but definitely something to watch, and that is a pretty concerning turnout of events. So, definitely a lot to witness with this event. Anyways, I did apologize for that. I did actually interrupt an important part that I was getting to, the cape that is present in Texas and those storms. And I already did mention the storms, but this cape I still need to show again on the NAM model, because this is showing possibly even stronger cape near here in the eastern Texas area, approaching towards Natchitoches and also Palestine in Texas. And this may be a concerning event that will appear here, and definitely a lot of cape in this region, so maybe some tornadoes even in eastern Texas, even as late as Friday night. Of course, this is a lot further west it's showing this event to be. Of course, some of it is going to be in Louisiana, but it's going to be behind the storm. So a lot of the storms might actually be in front of this cape, which actually means there might be less of a chance for tornadoes. So that is a little complicated. Either the storms are moving slower and they're still strong, or they're just missing the cape completely, which is possible with this system. But as it moves into the southeast, of course, it expands, like we already saw, and becomes a substantial threat. So that is it for the models, but we still have to look at the 500 millibar winds in this region, the wind speed. Let's look at how powerful these winds are, because these affect the weather a lot. The more powerful these winds are, the more they're likely to spin the storms along with them and cause lots of spin in the atmosphere. Let's first check with the HRRR with the 700 millibar convective area, 700 millibar vertical velocity, and you can see that there is some velocity, which may cause some rotation with these storms. This actually shows the height of storms, and the height of storms is also necessary to show how possible tornadoes are, because the higher storms are, the more area they have to work with to rotate, and that will cause tornadoes. You can see a few storms firing over here, even in the upper levels, and they are getting pretty high in the upper levels as well. All the way down here to Louisiana, we still have some storms. On Friday, into Mississippi, we also have a powerful set of storms moving through Friday afternoon, and then another round of storms in Louisiana, possibly, that maybe aren't quite as high, but still have the potential to produce some tornadoes as we move into this period. They then move off towards the east into Georgia and South Carolina, but that is pretty much what we're seeing here. It is a significant event ongoing, but definitely a lot to see here. Definitely a lot to see here. Looking at the 500 millibar wind speed, you can see there is quite a lot of winds that will spin the atmosphere in the upper levels. We also need the lower levels, which I'll get to in a moment, but definitely quite a bit of winds in this region. Definitely very monumentous range of strong winds in the upper levels, and all the way up, down here into Louisiana, Mississippi, and some of Texas. You can see there are significant winds that will manage to spin some storms, and that is a very good environment for those tornadoes. So we might get a tornado outbreak in this region, and it especially gets strong over here, even though, once again, this may show, because it's the NAM is showing that these storms may move a little bit ahead of where the most substantial cape and wind speeds in the upper levels may be. So they might not get in on that energy. We might still have some storms on the backside here, but still, we're not going to see the main cluster of storms even tap into this energy. It might be behind the storms. But we'll see. Maybe that'll just change the threat to later or to different storms. We don't really know yet. But that also goes into what we have with the convective area and where exactly you're going to see the reflectivity. But it really does seem like these storms are ahead of the curve. They're ahead of where that most moisture is. So we really do have to see what these storms are going to do. But what is after that? What is going to happen after this? It's the question. Well, you can see the storm moves off towards the east and enters into the northeast, causing some substantial rainfall, I might say, in the Delaware River Valley into New York, and that might cause some flooding. We did actually see some flooding just recently, so this might cause the flooding to get even worse in these areas, as it hasn't been long since the last major rainstorm in a lot of these locations in the northeast. There wasn't very many flood warnings that we saw, but this might exacerbate it to the point where we will get some flood watches and flood warnings in these areas of Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York. Of course, most of these storms now have moved offshore, but we're still experiencing some of these storms move off of the northeast and cause some snow even in the northeast, specifically Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and definitely Quebec as we move into March 11th. But then we kind of have a short quiet period. There's going to be this huge ridge that moves up into the country and causes all of the storms to be expanded so far out where we won't have much over the past few period. And this will continue until probably around March 13th, where we do get a few storms approach to us and cause some rain in Michigan, in both the Upper Peninsula and Lower Peninsula. And then our next storm may appear. As you see, there is a storm beginning to develop on the prowl in the southern U.S. So let's try to look at that as long as we can get. You can see that the system does end up reaching the Great Plains, and you can see a few storms spiraling across this region towards Missouri, into Nebraska, and some snow on the backside in Colorado. This is how far the model is going out here. It actually isn't. For some reason, these next hours can alone, but they would probably be not reliable as they're too far out anyways. So we're just going to look at what we have here, and really that's about it. I understand this video was a little shorter than my usual videos, but I think that's actually better because I do want to summarize my more, and that will be more able to summarize in these types of videos, especially with how quickly I am speaking and how quickly I am communicating my views to you. So I'm hoping I can make my videos a little shorter from now on. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications. If you don't know what the notifications are, the bell icon is to subscribe, and then also make sure to like this video. I don't care if you dislike. If you really didn't like this video, fine, dislike. I will be going live likely today, but definitely tomorrow because of this extreme threat. I don't know when today, but when those severe storms pop off. Once again, I'm unavailable between 6 and 6:50, but I probably won't be starting the live stream until later because the severe weather event isn't going to kick off until later. But just for you to know, it's always just easier. It's always just easier to ride by smoothly, without any pain, if you just take the moist data on the world freeway. Goodbye, guys.